All right, today we are diving deep into one single, incredibly detailed text. It's called Be Ashamed, Israel. And what we're going to do is unpack its really unique interpretation of biblical end-time prophecy. We're talking its core arguments, its complex timelines, and all the math that holds this thing together, step by step. So let's just start at the end, shall we? The entire analysis from this source builds to this one single date, 2370 AD. Now, according to the author, this is no random number. It is the calculated precise year for a final major prophetic event. So the big question is, how in the world did the author land on that specific year? Well, to understand the end, the text argues you have to go all the way back to the beginning of a massive period of punishment. It's like a prophetic clock that started ticking thousands of years ago. Okay, let's get into it. Now, before we go any further, there's a really crucial rule we have to get straight. The source makes it clear that biblical prophecy plays by its own rules when it comes to time. We're not using our modern calendar here. The text is very specific. It uses a 360-day prophetic year, which is based on ancient calendars, like the Babylonian one. Getting this concept down is absolutely key, because without it, none of the dates that follow are going to make any sense. Okay, so the foundation for this whole prophetic timeline kicks off in the book of Daniel, with his vision of 4 great beasts rising up out of the sea. The source identifies these not as some future mystery, but as 4 major historical empires that all directly controlled or oppressed Israel. First Egypt, then Mesopotamia, followed by Media-Persia, and finally the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great. So after these 4 big empires, Daniel's vision talks about a little horn that comes up and gains a ton of power. Now, what's really interesting here is how the source identifies this. It says, without a doubt, this little horn is the Roman Empire, which, conquered the territory of the Greek Empire, and later it transformed into the massive religious and political power of the Roman Catholic Church. This entity, this little horn, becomes totally central to the prophetic clock. And that brings us to what is, without a doubt, the most critical date in this entire prophecy, 70 AD. This is the year the Roman general Titus just completely leveled Jerusalem and destroyed the Second Temple. The source really hammers this point home. This one event, the event that stopped the daily sacrifice, is the definitive starting gun for several major prophetic timelines. Seriously, everything hinges on this moment. All right, let's move on to our first major calculation and see how this all builds out. This period is tied directly to the actions of that little horn, Rome. And believe it or not, it spans over 1,000 years. So here's how the source breaks down the biblical phrase, a time, times, and half a time. It follows a pretty common interpretation where a time equals one 360-day prophetic year. So that's 1 year plus 2 years plus half a year, giving us 3.5 years or 1,260 days. And in this prophetic system, each day represents a year. So boom, we get 1,260 years. Starting from the temple's destruction in 70 AD, that clock runs out in the year 1330 AD. The text actually pinpoints the end to the moment Louis XIV's claim to the Holy Roman Empire became uncontested, which it sees as a symbolic break between church and state power. But you know what? That 1,260-year period is just one piece of this giant puzzle. The source gets into a much longer period of punishment it calls the indignation. And this, it argues, was applied specifically to the ancient kingdoms of Israel for their long history of disobeying God. Now, according to the prophecy in Ezekiel, where the prophet is told to lie on his side to bear their sin, the 2 kingdoms actually got different sentences. The northern kingdom, Israel, was given a 390-year punishment, which started when it fell to Assyria way back in 721 BC. Meanwhile, the southern kingdom of Judah got 40 years, a punishment the text says was basically fulfilled and paid for during their 70-year exile in Babylon. And this slide right here, this is the core calculation. It's brilliant. The source points to Levitical law, specifically from Leviticus 26, which says that if you keep disobeying after the first punishment, that punishment gets multiplied by 7. So you take Israel's base sentence of 390 years, you multiply it by 7, and you get this staggering total, 2,730 years of punishment. So let's map this thing out. The 2,730-year prophetic clock for the Northern Kingdom started ticking way back in 721 BC. And if you follow that timeline all the way through, remember, using those 360-day prophetic years, it brings us to a date in our lifetime, 2009 AD. Yeah, according to this text, 2009 is the year Israel's long punishment finally came to an end. Okay, so what happened in 2009 that would mark such a huge occasion? The source points to several big global events that it sees as significant signs, almost like signals of a new era, now that Israel's time of wrath is officially over. Specifically, the text flags three major world events from that time. First, the election of Barack Hussein Obama in the United States. Second, what it describes as an intensified sectarian conflict within the Muslim world. And third, the creation of the very first permanent council president for the European Union. The source basically lays these out as notable events that happen to coincide precisely with the end of that 2,730-year clock. And this is really where we get to the core message of the entire text. It's not just about timelines. With the punishment period supposedly finished in 2009, the source argues that very specific, explicit divine commands now apply to a restored Israel. We're shifting from prophecy to action in the here and now. The first command is, well, it's one of intense self-reflection and shame. The text pulls this quote straight from the prophet Ezekiel, saying that Israel must look back at its history, remember its past sins, and feel a deep sense of loathing for the actions that led to that long punishment in the first place. The second command, this one from the prophet Jeremiah, is a direct call for active justice. It's a crystal clear instruction to protect the vulnerable, the stranger, the orphan, the widow, to rescue the exploited from their oppressors, and to stop all violence and the shedding of innocent blood. This is presented as a primary, non-negotiable duty for this new, post-punishment era. Okay, now let's circle all the way back to that date where we started. We've gone through the 1260-year clock and the 2730-year clock, but there is one final prophetic timer, and this is the one that leads us directly to that mysterious date of 2370 AD. So, this final period comes from another one of Daniel's visions, the vision of the evening and morning. It's all about the cleansing of the sanctuary, which the source interprets as its final, complete reconsecration. And the prophecy states this will happen 2,300 prophetic days, or, using that same day for a year rule, 2,300 years after the daily sacrifice was stopped. And this is the final calculation, and it's pretty straightforward. The clock starts at that all-important date, 70 AD, with the destruction of the temple. You add 2,300 prophetic years to that starting point, and you land exactly in the year 2370 AD. According to the source, this is the moment the sanctuary will finally be cleansed, bringing the prophetic vision to its ultimate conclusion. So after all that, we're left with this. The text has laid out this incredible web of prophetic timelines, and it claims one of them was fulfilled just over a decade ago. It argues that this fulfillment came with a clear command: be ashamed of the past and actively pursue justice in the present. And that brings us to the final, really provocative question the source leaves us with. If that 2,730-year punishment truly did end in 2009, what does it mean for Israel to fulfill the command to execute justice and protect the vulnerable right now, today?